Good morning. Our learning is Ilay Nishmas Mindel Mariam Askam Reuven and Shamash and Aliyah.
You know, Rabbi, I have to add something to this.
Yotzazai.
I don't know exactly what it is, but I've added something.
Check. We're good. You most definitely do. Okay. Kufnan Dalet Amud Aleph. Some of the people listening said, "Oh, we hear there's new people there." So you're doing well. Okay. By the way, for those listening, if you haven't, please check in because we're hoping to make a CM. I still have just been delaying and pushing off, talking about when and figuring out when, but we will make a CM. Mirz Hashem. So if you're following online and we haven't been in touch about this, then just reach out. Okay. Kufnan Dalet Amud Aleph. We had a discussion yesterday about what the punishment is for someone who causes their animal to do a malacha on Shabbos. The malacha is called mechamer, causing your animal to do a malacha, which is certainly prohibited. Everyone agrees it's prohibited. The question is, what is the extent of the punishment if this happens? We discussed karban chatas. We discussed the when it's done by mistake. If a person actually has to bring a karban chatas or not. We discussed the chi of skila, which is the punishment of death, the execution, if a person does it deliberately. And we're going to have one more opinion. One more opinion. So here we go. Top of Kufna Dalet Amud Aleph. Rav Zvid Masnei Hachi. Rav Zvid taught this ruling with the following version. Amar Rami Bar Chama. Rami Bar Chama said, Hamechamer achar behema b'Shabbos. Person who leads an animal on Shabbos, an animal that is carrying objects. So again, there is a malacha there, and you're causing your animal to do malacha by carrying an object in the public domain. B'shogeg eno chayav chatas. If it's done by mistake, you are not going to be bringing a karban chatas. However, b'mezid chayav skila. If it's done on purpose, you're liable to death by stoning. So this is the most unique version. In other words, until now we've had versions that, there's no chatas, no stoning. We've had there is a chatas and there is stoning, and here we have no chatas, yes stoning. Okay? So now the rationale for that, if you recall from yesterday, it makes a lot of sense, because there is a pasuk in the Torah that says that don't do malacha, lo sasam al malacha atu v'hemtecha, right? You and your animal. So it talks about not doing malacha. It equates, it juxtaposes, I should say, your prohibition against malacha together with your prohibition against causing your animal to do malacha. And just like you, if a person is mechal Shabbos, they get skila. So too, if you cause your animal to be mechal Shabbos, if you cause your animal to do a malacha on Shabbos, you will also get skila. So that's where that comes from. And in terms of why you're not going to bring a karban chatas, that's also from yesterday. What did we see? We saw that all the chiyuvei chatas really are learnt out from avodah zarah. And as the Gemara there points out, by avodah zarah, you are not going to be chayav if you cause your animal to serve idols, whatever exactly that would mean. But the point is that just like by avodah zarah, it's only the individual who could be chayav. So too for causing so it's going to exclude a scenario of causing an animal to do something, and therefore there will be no chiyuv chatas when it comes to an animal. That's the premise behind this. That's the basis behind this. Okay, so Rava asks a question. Rami Bar Chama, Masiv Rava, Hamechal es Shabbos b'davar shechayavin al shegaso chatas. Okay, so one who the Mishnah. We had a Mishnah earlier which said, the Mishnah we quoted earlier, a person who desecrates Shabbos with something which you are chayav for doing it by mistake, you would bring a chatas, chayavin al zdono skila, is subject to stoning when it's done intentionally. Right? So the Mishnah says explicitly, you do something which brings a chatas, for by mistake, you are going to, if you do that same action on purpose, you get skila. So it clearly says that they're always going to go hand in hand when it comes to Shabbos. Mistake, chatas, deliberate, stoning. So the Gemara says, and therefore the question Rava asks, ein chayavin al shegaso chatas, ein chayavin al zdono skila. In a situation where a person does not get chatas, if it's done by mistake, you would not get skila if it's done on purpose. So you see the two always go hand in hand. How could you, Rami Bar Chama, say, no chatas, yes skila? The Mishnah seemingly is saying, not that way. So the Gemara says, no, there's no proof from there. Miktani, does the Mishnah say, ein chayavin? Right? It doesn't make, you made that implication, you made that inference, but it's not true. Hachi ka'amar, this is the way to read the Mishnah. Davar shechayavin al shegaso chatas, chayavin al zdono skila. For something which one is subject to a chatas when it's done by mistake, is always going to get skila. However, v'yesh davar she'ein chayavin al shegaso chatas, v'chayavin al zdono skila. And there's also going to be something which a person doesn't get chatas, but you will still get skila for. In other words, all the Mishnah said is that if a person has to bring a chatas for a mistake, then by definition you will also get skila. But doesn't therefore say that there aren't things which you get skila for, but you don't have a chatas. All it's saying is, if yes on chatas, then definitely yes on skila. But that doesn't mean that if no chatas, no skila. That's not what it's saying. It's saying if you know it has a chatas, then you know there'll be a skila. But there's going to be cases where there will not be a chatas and there will be a skila. Umaynihu, and what is it? Mechamer, and that is the case of leading a loaded animal. Okay. Bottom line is we've had three versions of what exactly is the prohibition of causing an animal to do something on Shabbos. Bottom line, most practically for us, a person cannot. Again, if you're in the public domain, you have an animal, you cannot put your objects on the animal. Again, aside from the dispensation we saw, the person who's caught, traveling and it's already Shabbos and they're stuck, etc. There we have a certain specific dispensation, a complicated one. Remember, you have to take the wallet off the animal as it starts, put it back, take it off and on to make sure it doesn't start and stop.
But you're still making the animal work, though.
Correct. You're not making it to a malacha, right? That's what we established yesterday. We said that it's something where if this would be two humans, it would only be aser midirabanan. When it comes to an animal, it wouldn't be even aser at all. Fine. But again, very rare scenario. Okay. Now the Gemara, in this next two lines, next few lines, it's going to touch upon one of the most complicated, controversial debates and halachic situations, in probably in modern times. Let's see what it is. So Rava Achua de Rav Mari Barachel. So Rava, who is the brother of Rav Mari Barachel, V'amrila, there are those who say Avua de Rav Mari Barachel, that Rava was the father of Rav Mari Barachel. Okay. Fine. So there's two versions. This Rava is probably not the regular Rava. Was Rava either the brother of this Rav Mari Barachel, or was he the father of Rav Mari Barachel? Now, let's think about that name. That's a funny name, because typically when we in Judaism, we typically, unless a person's ill, we normally say their name, Bar, the son of, and they say the father's name. So when we're saying the mother's name, why would we say just the mother's name? So as the Gemara is about to tell us and about to imply, because, and we see this elsewhere in another Gemara, it spells this out, and that is that Rav Mari, his father, was not a Jew, and his mother Rachel was taken as captive. It's quite common back in the day, taken as captive, and the captor impregnated her. Okay, his mother's name was Rachel. She was impregnated by a non-Jew. This non-Jew ended up converting. Whole story. But the bottom line is that halachically, that this is not considered Rav Mari's father, because Rachel is the mother, but the father is not even though biologically would be the father, halachically would not be considered the father. Okay, so the Gemara asked Lishna Basra, according to the second version, which says that Rava was the father of Rav Mari Barachel. Kasha hada Rav Achsharei Rav Mari Barachel. Why would Rav have to come along and say Rav Mari Barachel is fit to be what? Umanya before Sida Bavel, to be appointed among the officers of Bavel. If his father was Rava, okay, why did Rav have to come along? Right, according to version number 2, Rav Mari Barachel's father is Rava, a Jew, right? Why would Rav have to come along and say that he is fit to be an officer of Bavel? If both of his parents are Jewish, there'd be no reason to do so. The only reason you have to do so is if his father was a non-Jew, then it would make sense that Rav would come along and say, but he is still fit to be an officer. Okay, so therefore, the Gemara says, Dilma Trey Mari Barachel Havu. Perhaps there are two different people called Mari Barachel, and then we don't have that question. One Rav had to establish as an officer, and the other one would be the son of Rava. Okay, so why is this so controversial? Because where's this coming? What's going on over here? Why do we have to need Rav to weigh in? There is a pasuk in the Torah that says, Som Tasim Alecha Melech. You should establish upon yourself a king. Okay, now the pasuk should say Som Alecha Melech. You should make upon yourself a king. Why does it say Som Tasim, which is like a double terminology? So the Gemara elsewhere tells us that one of the things we learn from here is that it's specifically that the psukim, the limitations on who could be a king are going to include not just the monarchy, but also include all positions of authority. So, in as much as the Torah says, Som tasim alecha mikerav achecha, that you should place upon yourself a king from among your brothers, meaning, and what that means, it certainly means a Jew, that goes without saying, but it means someone who is born as a Jew, okay, meaning as opposed to a convert. This pasuk, Som tasim alecha melech, will also mean that in positions of at least Jewish authority, you would not be able to have someone who is the child of either a convert or perhaps a child of converts to be a king, to be in a position of authority either. Now, what the rationale is behind that we don't have, the Gemara itself doesn't even illustrate. It doesn't explain at all. There are different conjectures. Probably, the two most rational reasons I've seen is conjecture, and we don't know why. The two most rational reasons, one would possibly be that a person who is not born, if if a critical element of being in a position of leadership is understanding the people that you're leading, someone who by definition is born as an outsider, they may be able to contribute. And one of the things that we find consistently in the Torah is that people who come from the outside contribute like a unique perspective that a person who's born on the inside, you never have, because you're just so used to it, but someone comes to the outside, they're able to provide a unique, like Yisro, for example, is the classic example. Here's someone who's on the outside, he's able to see things with fresh eyes that all the people who are in don't see because they're just used to it. So without a doubt, we elevate and we have to treat with respect anyone who's a convert, but in terms of really understanding the inner workings of somebody who is born up with a different culture, we can understand there's a limitation. By definition, there's a limitation. You will not understand, if you walk into a new country, a new place, a new culture, you're not going to understand it like the locals, like the people who are there, and therefore that might be a limitation in a position of leadership. That's one reason. Another reason is it might be like almost like an acknowledgement of the limitation of the recipients of that leadership. That by definition, that not by definition, but sadly, the reality is that people are more dismissive of someone who's from the outside, and therefore, in terms of having solid leadership, in terms of someone really doing a good job, there might be limitations in that respect because they will not respect a person who's coming from the outside. Okay, this is conjecture. We don't know exactly the reason, but that is the halacha. Okay, and a lot of discussion around this halacha. You have Shemaya v'Avtalion, who the Mishnah tells us come from converts. So a lot of people, so some say you can't impose them on others, but if we accept them, then it's okay. The Maharal rejects this. The Maharal says, doesn't say that they were the children of converts, they were the descendants of converts. So once you're past a generation, that's meaning once they're not the children of converts, but rather they're a few generations in, then that would be a different story. But there's no concept of, but again, this prohibition is going to be across the board, whether it's judges, whether it's even there's a lot of discussion about having a pulpit rabbi who is a convert or a children of converts. Massive discussion about whether or not this would work. There are those who accept this, again, argue that in a democratically elected position, then it's not som tasim. In other words, the whole idea of a king or even the leaders during their time is someone who is imposed on the congregation. There wasn't like a vote. That would be like anathema to them. Like this whole notion, you wouldn't vote, that would be like disrespectful. Basically, they'd place it and then they'd be in charge. So maybe that's an exception. Again, there are those who vehemently disagree, say no, it's across the board, and you would not be able to have someone who's a convert or a direct child of converts. There's a discussion about a situation, maybe even our discussion over here, Mari Barachel, if the father, what maybe the reason Rav said it's okay is because one parent is a convert, the other one isn't, maybe that would be allowed. Okay, why? So that part is not as controversial, it doesn't come up as much. The place where this plays a role is because the same psukim, which limits who could be a king and say it can't be a convert, also say melech velo malka. The Sifrei, which speaks about what this pasuk actually means, says a king and not a queen. So the same Som Tasim, which says it's not just about the monarchy, but it's also about positions of authority, right? This is a lot of the discussion about female rabbis, maharats, things like that. Is this are you allowed to have a female king or female, not just a female king, but are you allowed to have a female person in a position of authority? That's born out of this entire discussion. The same discussion about converts will exist with female leaders as well. And so female rabbis, seemingly, pretty much across the board, everyone would say, that is seen as a position of real authority and would not be allowed. Where there is a lot of interesting discussions about what about positions of, other positions. So Rav Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about a mashgicha. Are you allowed to have a female mashgicha? Is that a position of authority? Ultimately, he rules leniently. There are the Star K has female mashgichim. There are other kashrus agencies which do not have female, mashgichots, and they base this on this gemara, on this whole discussion, that being a position of authority. But another area of much disputes is a shul president. Right, you're allowed to have a shul president, the shul president is a position of religious authority. Is that allowed? So you have some saying, yeah, it's fine. It's a democratically. First of all, if anyone knows what it means to be a shul president, you're walked upon and spat upon and yelled at. It's not a position of authority. No one listens to you. You're just whatever. So maybe that's not really an issue. But this is a massive discussion. There's a lot of discussion. There's shuls who specifically our shul historically has not elected into a position of president a female for this reason, because there are many who say that's a line. In our show we have like chairperson, which is more of a secular role, as opposed to president, which is more of a religious role. But it's based on this discussion. What else? Yeah, principals of schools, right? I mean, some schools, in Benos, they'll have a female head of the school. In Beis Yaakov, I think they're Beshita. They will not do that for this reason. Again, a lot of discussion about, and again, it's based on these principles. The different ideas that are brought over here. One of the allowances, we'll call it a workaround that is brought up, is if it's not a single individual. If you have a position which is a shared position, in other words, there are a couple of people who are in charge, then that gives more flexibility. Then no one's saying like there's a position of authority. It's really a team of people working together, and some places will utilize that. Let's say a shul president will have that. If there's a team of people, school principal might have that allowance. Anyway, fascinating discussion, and it's a short Amud, so we figured we'd go on a little tangent. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's go further.
To what extent were the Jews assimilated in Bothell?
I have no idea.
I mean, I'm curious because here's this woman with this guy.
She was taken as a captive.
Good point.
Yeah. That was extremely prevalent. That's worth noting, and that is that captivity. Unfortunately, Baruch Hashem, we're at a time where it's so terrible, and it is terrible. No one knows. And again, even historically, you can't sell a Sefer Torah for anything except for Pidyon Shvuyim. You're allowed to sell a Sefer Torah to redeem people, but the notion of captivity was the norm. Meaning, you go pirates. Till a little while ago, till Thomas Jefferson stepped in, right? I mean, pirates were people were taking people captive all the time. Jews were known to be good merchandise. People would buy Jews. This was common practice, and sometimes they would protect their goods, and sometimes they would not. And this was happening all the time. Okay. Yeah. No, 100%. I'm saying. My point is just unfortunately, our ancestors would not be as shaky. Baruch Hashem, we're living in a time where we, thank God, have moved so far away from that we could recognize how terrible and sick and disgusting it is. Our ancestors would, unfortunately, be a little bit more desensitized than us, because this was unfortunately so prevalent that people were taken into captivity. Again, lots of it was financial, which is far less, and therefore they would actually make sure to be give them what they need. But certainly after something like the Crusades, a lot of the times of upheaval, historians will point out, we focus on the destroying of the cities, but there was a significant amount of captivity and people being sold as slaves and specifically as into prostitution, etc. This was the norm. This was the norm in a lot of our history. Okay, so let's get back to our Gemara. Havi maskel hashmaita. Okay, so bottom line is this individual, Rav Mari bar Rachel, would teach the following ruling: Mishmei Rav Yochanan liftar, to say that a person who calls their animal to work is always exempt across the board. I'm Rav Yochanan, meaning this is teaching. Rav Yochanan said as follows: Hamechaber acher behemta b'Shabbos patur miklum. If a person leads their animal on Shabbos, they are entirely exempt. If they do so by mistake, they're not going to be chayav chatas. As we explained, that since all the prohibitions that one would bring a chatas have to be similar to idolatry, and an idolatry causing an animal to do malacha, idolatry, that they don't work. So therefore, there's no chayav chatas. You also will not be chayav death by stoning. It's not, as we learned from the Mishnah, the proof that we tried to bring earlier. The Mishnah said that one who desecrates Shabbos doing something that you'd bring a chatas, you bring, by definition, you get stoning. So if this case does not get chatas, and as we just established, because it's compared to avodah zarah, then ein chayav l'sdonos skila. You do not get skila. So and therefore so you don't bring a korban chatas. You don't get skila. But now there's one more thing. A lav, a prohibition, even if you don't get killed, what happens if you violate a prohibition of the Torah? You get lashes. Okay, you get lashes in the times of the basin. So the Gemara, Rav Yochanan continues, the lav nami lo mechayev. You're not even liable the typical punishment of getting lashes for transgressing a negative commandment. Why? Because the pasuk, which we learned this from, is a pasuk that is needed for a azhara. What does that mean? What that means is that whenever the Torah speaks about a punishment for whenever you have anything where there is a punishment in the Torah for a prohibition, it's always going to be mentioned twice. Okay, rule. Whenever you find anything in the Torah where there's a punishment for misas beistin, for getting killed by beistin, meaning if it's something which you're going to get stoned for, or whatever, all the different punishments of beistin, it's going to have to be listed twice. The first time is listed for, it's known as being listed as an azhara, as a warning. The second time it's being listed as, and here's the punishment. So our whole source is Lo sas b'malacha ata behemtecha, you and your animal, right? So the fact that source is the first source that speaks about the prohibition, that whole pasuk is being used as an azhara, as a warning, and therefore that pasuk, although it says losasa, which is a lav, it's a losasa, it's a negative prohibition, it can't be used to say you're going to get lashes because the pasuk's being used as an azhara, as a warning. Okay, v'chol lav shnitin l'tzaras mitzvah space number. The next page, ain't lokin love, any prohibition that is a warning for court-imposed execution, you do not get malchus. Then the Gemara says, we're top of kufna dalad and beis, v'afilu ma'da amar lokin. There is a machlokas about this. There are those who say you do get malchus for such a case. Lichtov rachmana, even if that were the case, even if you want to tell me that this pasuk is you are able to get lashes because there's no need for a unique individual pasuk to say that you're warned, but even that pasuk that speaks about the warning can be used to teach also that there is a chiyuv, that you'll get a penalty of lashes, but still there's something wrong with the pasuk that therefore limits us. Why? Because lichtav rachmana losascha malacha uvehemtecha. The pasuk should say, do not do any malacha and your animal. Right? That's what we say, right? This is the pasuk we say in Kiddush, right? Losasam malacha uvehemtecha. Don't do malacha and your animal. But what does it say? Right? The pasuk says, Ata lamali. It says losasa v'malacha ata uvehemtecha. You and your animal. Why is it repeating you? Who niyod mechayev to imply the following? Who niyod mechayev to say that you are going to be chayev behemto lamechayev, but you will never be liable for any punishment if your animal does something wrong. So the extra word who basically distinguishes. It says there's two things going on in this pasuk. Yes, if you do malacha, you will get punishments, but if you cause your animal to do malacha, it's still aser, as we learned from this pasuk. But in terms of punishments, no. The word who says that there's a distinction between you and it's different than the animal, and therefore, bottom line is Rav Yochanan comes out saying that if you cause your animal to do malacha, you are not going to get misa, you're not going to bring a chatas, and you're not going to even get malchus. Okay, have a wonderful day.